What is going on, all you wonderful A-plusers out there? It is I, Stuart, here once again to give you guys another review of Kamen Rider Saber. This time we are of course going to be looking at Kamen Rider Saber episode 4, and guys, we have had a really good episode last week, and like I mentioned before, last week, even though I really enjoyed it, it just felt like really short to me, and I think that was just because I was like having a lot of fun. One of the commenters actually did also mention that there was a lot of transformation sequences that kind of padded out the time, so it might have been a little bit of that too, but honestly I think, you know, kind of the mixture of both really made all of like last week's episode feel really short, and it really had me anticipating this week's episode, getting really excited, but also really hoping that they'd be able to stick the landing. And well, let's get into this episode and see if they stick the landing as much as I was hoping they would. So the episode starts out with the entire group back at the North Pole, and they're kind of just you know, going over the events of the previous episode essentially. Very understandably, Ogami is very pissed off, and I gotta give some props to the actor who plays Ogami here, because, you know, he really does sell like the anger emotion. It's that moment where, you know, you're in a room with someone who you know is super upset, and you know you want to cheer them up, but you're not really sure what to say because you feel like if you say the wrong thing, all you're going to be doing is pissing them off even more. And that ends up being what happens here. You know, you have everyone trying to say, we're going to get your son back, we're gonna figure this out, you know, even some people trying to be all sympathetic towards him, but there's like no right thing to say, because no matter what people say, he just keeps getting more and more pissed off, especially at Touma, who simply, you know, promises him that he's gonna get his son back. You know, this is when Ogami just, you know, expresses how pissed off he is at Touma for just, you know, making all of these promises that to him seem like super empty. It doesn't seem like genuine at all. We then cut back to the bookstore, and we get a scene that I think is kind of amazing and really shows the brilliance of Touma's character overall. Essentially, they're trying to figure out what kind of creature they were dealing with, and Touma suspects that this creature isn't actually destroyed, like perhaps maybe it regenerated. So he looks back at what the creature said when they called it a lizard. He, you know, simply replies, "I am not a lizard." Touma uses that information. He grabs two books, one being an encyclopedia of animals, essentially, the other one being a book on salamanders overall and the different types there are, because he discovers that this creature might actually be a salamander, discovers what type of salamander it is, and then uses that along with a third book. I should have brought this image up earlier, but he uses a third book that's a fiction book, essentially, to discover that this specific creature is based on the legend of the man-eating salamander. And I love that. I love how his love of books really comes into play here for his investigation, you know, being able to mix both fantasy and reality together in order to put together like what kind of creature they're dealing with and how to stop it. Like, that's really clever writing to me, and I really hope they utilize this idea a lot more in upcoming episodes. Meanwhile, back at the North Pole, Kento tries to convince Ogami that, you know, Touma's promises aren't actually as empty as you know, Ogami kind of claims that they are. He tries to convince him to, you know, put a little more faith into Touma, and eventually this does work, because he does come back to the bookstore after Touma has figured out what creature that they're going after, and he does say, you know, before it had been in the previous episode, Ogami would go after the creature, and essentially Rintaro and Touma were really just tagging along. They weren't really part of you know, his quest, essentially. As far as he was concerned, they were just strangers to him. So here it's kind of cool to see him actually willing to give the two of them the benefit of the doubt, and so you have the three of them trying to go after and save his son together. Meanwhile, I will say this, I thought I was gonna hate Mei in this episode, because in episode 2, one of my biggest complaints about her is how she just really got in the way and became kind of problematic for our team. And with her insistence on needing to come onto this mission, it made me think that this was going to be happening again. As she tries to follow them, she trips, and then she discovers that there's another one of those Wonder Ride books, the blank ones, the same one that Sora found that trapped him into the fantasy world. She discovers that there's one in her backpack. And so she decides to use it in order to go looking for him, which, you know, as I'm watching this, I'm just kind of like, what are you thinking? All you're gonna do is get yourself trapped as well. Like, you're accomplishing nothing, right? I'm gonna come back to this point later on, because we then cut to the three of them about to teleport to this fantasy world, but then we are introduced to a new creature, and I'm gonna try to pronounce this creature's name, and I'm probably going to be butchering it. I'm just warning you guys right now. Megiddo. I have no idea. Definitely let me know how badly I butchered that name, but I'm just going to be referring to him currently as this mysterious this mysterious swordsman, essentially. This guy is apparently so powerful that he's actually killed Kamen Riders in the past. While essentially Touma originally volunteers to stay behind and stop this guy, essentially Ogami decides that he's going to be the one to stay behind since he's a lot more experienced and he knows how dangerous this guy really is. So he sends Rintaro and Touma to go save his son, basically putting his full trust in the two of them. So the two of them head off and we get a really epic fight. I'll get a little more into at the end of my review about the fight that happens between Ogami and this mysterious swordsman. But we then cut back to the fantasy world and we see what it is that May was actually planning on doing. We see that she brought fireworks with her, so she uses those fireworks to signal Touma and Rintaro so they can locate exactly where everyone's gone missing to. Touma and Rintaro arrive and they free everyone, but of course that's when the creature arrives as well. We get another really cool fight between Touma, Rintaro, and of course this creature as well. And this time things do go in their favor. The fight is kind of going the same way it was before. Like, they're able to destroy it, but similar to other villains that have regenerative abilities, it just keeps coming back and then regenerating itself. And not to mention, there's also the fact that it's so like slimy that anytime they try to attack it, their weapons seem to constantly just slide off of it. But then Touma gets this brilliant idea, because before we've been seeing them use like 2 power-ups at a time, but never 3. But of course, if you look at their armor or their slots on their armor, I should say, you'll notice that there's 3 slots. So this is the first time we see 3 different power-ups being used all at once. I'm going to get a little more into this as well at the end of this review, but essentially Touma uses like 3 different powers in order to take him down for good this time, making it so there is no way he's able to regenerate. The day seems like everything's good in the end, because Sora's reunited with Ogami, so father and son are reunited. Everything seems all happy, but then we get Caliber joining in the action finally, and he is just wiping the floor with Touma and Rintaro, and in fact he's about to finish them off, but then another Kamen Rider appears and saves both of them, one whose name we are not sure. It might be one of the riders we've been introduced to before that we haven't seen transform yet, but it might actually be someone completely new. I actually have no idea what to expect going into the next episode. All I can say is that this was a really awesome episode, a really cool way to wrap up, the events of the previous episode, and I just freaking loved it all the way through. The 2 big things I wanted to really give a shout out to in this episode definitely has to go to the fight scenes, where I've kind of brought this up before, is that I'm going to be repeating myself when it comes to talking about like the fight scenes in Kamen Rider, because like I said, I've seen 4 Kamen Rider series before this one, and one of the biggest highlights of all of them has always been the fight scenes. Like, Kamen Rider knows how to produce some really good fight scenes, and whereas Super Sentai, not saying the fight scenes are ever bad in Super Sentai, but essentially you get like a bunch of okay fight scenes with some really good ones sprinkled in, whereas Kamen Rider just seems to be good fight scene after another really good fight scene after another really good fight scene. Here we get 2 really good fight scenes going on at the same time. Both of them have some really well coordinated real well coordinated choreography. Really bad terminology, but essentially you get what I mean. Like, the coordination is really good, and one thing I also love is that there is a decent amount of CG in this episode, along with the previous episode, but it wasn't like overused like they did in episode 2, I feel. I do like that they've been kind of calming down on it, so when they do use the CG, it doesn't look too bad, and even when it does look like not very good, there's not that much of it, so it's not like distracting from the overall fight, and I really appreciated that about this episode. I also love the way they've been using the power-ups, because I do love how they can mix and mash different power-ups together. So essentially, it's not just this power-up works for one Kamen Rider only. It's like, no, you can use this power-up on this Kamen Rider or this Kamen Rider, and you can use several different power-ups all at once. It's very impressive in the department of the costumes, because I can only imagine how much of a pain that must be to make, because you then not only got to make a costume for every different Kamen Rider, but you got to make a costume that has like so many different forms, and not just 3 different forms, but I mean like 3 empty slots that could have a good amount of like potential different power-ups. And it's not like one power-up changes the costume into one thing. It's like one power-up changes one aspect of the costume, meaning that if you have 2 different power-ups, 2 aspects of the costumes are going to be changed. There's that really impressive like level of attention to detail that they have there with the costume designs. And you know, I gotta imagine this isn't cheap to design this way, but I gotta give a lot of credit to that, because that's just like, it's just really incredible to me. So overall, guys, this was another really good episode. I definitely recommend checking this episode out if you have the chance. But at the end of the day, those are just my A+ opinions. We here at A+ Opinions always want to know what you guys think, so definitely let me know your thoughts of the episode in the comments below. Definitely hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, but above all, guys, just remember to keep it A+.